Okay, well, I'd like to hand out these spreadsheets. And, this is a spreadsheet that compares the educational specifications with the adjusted program as it was when we were doing schematic design. And on the far right column, the areas of typical rooms. It's not a full analysis, it just shows where we are with the square footage of typical spaces. And the numbers that are highlighted in yellow are the numbers I'd like you to pay attention to now. I might take a plan. Some of this, take my word for it. Here, this is the lower or the mid-level, the main level of the school. Here's the 9-10 wing. Here is 11-12. The learning commons, auditorium, and the administration area near the front door. We have typical general classrooms on all that floor, and over here we have general classrooms, and here are some science labs. Now, in the case of the general classrooms, the median floor area for a general classroom in the spec was, I think, 765, and that was what we were showing in the schematic design. Then, as we started working with the school on talking about how those general classrooms should be organized from the standpoint of built-in cabinets, and also different arrangements of tables and chairs for different learning styles, Michelle felt that we weren't getting enough clearance around some of the tables and chairs in particular. So we felt the need to sort of add a few inches to both the depth and the width of the classroom, and by the time you've done that, then you've added square footage. But the reason that we are showing that is because in teaching today, in the classrooms, children just don't learn in rows, looking at the front of the classroom. There are different teaching styles where, in some classrooms, they may indeed be in that format. Others where the students are sitting two to a desk, and even 4 to a desk. They may group the tables, the desks in different ways, so that they can work in groups, either in 2s or in 4s, or even in groups of 6. So those different arrangements don't all work in the same size classroom, and we made this easing of the classroom on the plans to accommodate that possibility in the future. I think it's a really important topic for discussion. We as architects would like to provide the flexibility in the classrooms that administrators, the teachers are more and more looking for and expecting. So that caused a slight bumping up in the square footage of the schools, which you can see in that. If you multiply the 26 classrooms by the 40 square feet, it's not a lot. It's just one small thing. Then in natural sciences, the natural sciences are not not fully equipped science classrooms. Nevertheless, they, and we were envisaging that they would be possible to make those classrooms smaller than typical science classrooms. And in fact, they are, but they are not quite as small as we hoped. So in order to, well, I'll get the next plan. Here we have some of these smaller science classrooms that are nevertheless larger than the standard classrooms, because we need counter space on the perimeter, and that adds to the square footage. And also we have to be able to have the kids in the classroom, each at their own space. So we found that 765 square feet was not sufficient. The lab classrooms in the 11-12, we had an allocation of 1,050 square feet in order to meet the curriculum needs and the amount of equipment that was requested, and the length of cabinets. We needed 12 units. So that was another adjustment in the square footage. I think at this point we have to get a sense of how we address that particular problem. We do have to provide clearances around all furniture that is not only sufficient to meet the day-to-day needs of classes, but also meet the standards of the state. That is all mandated. So a classroom that may be a little smaller may work just fine, but from the standpoint of meeting space criteria, is not going to cut it. Yeah.
I'm all in favor of having the best classrooms we can possibly have with campus space. We have to keep the creep down. Hold the creep.
What is the gross square footage of these, you guys know?
I beg your pardon?
What is the gross square footage of this?
I'm sorry.
What's the total gross?
I don't know. I don't have that. I'm just isolating these numbers.
Classrooms was 1,040 so far.
Overall for the building, I'm just tracking from here.
Just in the 26 spots.
You're about 101,000 net for the site gross.
I mean, there's net square footage, and then there's gross square footage.
Sorry,
And as we said before, we're going to work on addressing the creep. Some of the creep is due to these program adjustments, and the direction I believe we've heard from you is that we have to shrink, and that is a part of what we will be doing. It's important, though, for us to also point out to you what is causing this to occur. And these are indicative of those reasons, of those causes. Now, in the learning commons, we have a big jump in square footage. That's part head.
What was the impetus for that happening?
Well, Jack may have a better idea of it. Carrie, you may be able to speak to that.
I think included in the Learning Commons is the support service suite, is that correct?
The
Guidance?
no, that is a separate, that's a separate section.
Richard, some of these things stacks on top of something else, right? Because the Learning Commons stacks on top of the cafeteria
On the
below,
cafeteria, that's right.
as well as the kitchen area. The kitchen in the cafeteria is directly below.
It's directly below.
Yeah.
Okay.
So
So what
has to be?
what happens is that as you project the thing
Okay.
out,
It's just a bigger footprint. It's
Right.
gotta be bigger.
yeah,
Space.
yeah, you,
Unless you can repurpose the second floor square footage.
but then,
Well,
Right.
the,
We could use it for something else.
well, the needs in this area were one factor in pushing this out, making that bigger. Down here in the cafeteria area, in consultation with our kitchen expert, we determined that we had to push the kitchen and the servery from where it was and expand its footprint. The demands on that space was such that we had to increase the square footage. Now, I believe that we can pull this back somewhat because we have space here that we can expand the cafeteria into. That is the kind of compression that we can readily do there. And if we reduce the footprint of the cafeteria, obviously we're going to reduce the space that's available for the Learning Commons. The Learning Commons is a space where work can be done, I believe, to strip out some square footage. This is where we are.
yeah, I think, you know, I'm just trying to sort of think about in terms of how, you know, in some ways, you know, if you make the Learning Common smaller than the cafeteria, it kind of doesn't make sense because so the Learning Commons, we have a certain size for the cafeteria down below and the kitchen. If you build something that's the same size as up above, that's what's happening here, is that the Learning Common, whether it became potentially a little bit bigger than necessary to program, but if you force to reduce the size, what you end up getting is a whole bunch of roofs and more surfaces, and we may not really want to do that. In other words, it's relatively inexpensive square footage. So you know, when you stack two on top of each other, then try to make one smaller than on top of each other. So it's not really, we're not really paying that much extra for the additional space. But I do see that the central area, there's a lot of space in that area. Maybe some of that can creep into that and reduce the overall size.
As I look at this, I think that we can pull this in.
About 8,000 square feet. That's all.
Yeah, it's not that much more. But when you do that, it'll be like 5, so it'll be okay.
Do you necessarily, if you have that kind of space, do you necessarily have to use it for the Learning Commons, or can you use it for something else?
In the case of the cafeteria, I think that we can reduce the width of this because the space to move down into the hub. We were not proposing to enclose the cafeteria on the southern end anyway. We're in our mind the cafeteria, it can become part of this space, just as you would find at a food mall, at a food court, at the mall. So it would become part of that space. So we have the ability to move that down, and I think it's also the case that we can reduce the depth of this and push the Learning Commons into here, creating greater efficiency. I think all of that is possible. So I'm not alarmed by that at all. that's a real option. It's in, that we have, it's in these more cellular parts of the building where a classroom is a classroom is a classroom. It's got fixed dimension. And once we've built it, and that's the end.
So, I'm gonna ask a stupid question, probably yell at it, or, I mean, we have 26 classrooms, but what's more important, is a larger classroom that you can do things in more important than having 20, 25 or 24 classrooms? Would that be another way to gain space? Probably going where I should go, but.
No, that's a good goal.
Well,
I mean, what's more important is what I'm thinking about. You want more space, you want a usable space. It doesn't make sense to make 26 classrooms if they're all too skinny
If
for
they're too
use.
small, no,
Right.
no.
So,
I think there are still a variety of things, and you know, the whole concept about, you know, how do we bring that portion of the building, you know, with the learning commons and CAP, once we know, you know, specifically what the absolute needs are for a cafeteria facility, not the lunchroom so much as the kitchen area, and to what degree can that be shrunk, have the upstairs shrink as well. I think there are still areas that ideally we're going to continue to shoot for having the number of classrooms be designated. That's critical, and at the same time they need to be the appropriate size to do the kind of work that we're doing. I think there are still other areas that we can continue to play with. And you can see, even on this sheet, the number of things we've already eliminated or we played with in order to get the core of what we really believe is important. And, you know, at this point, I didn't come up with 8,000, but if that's what they're talking about at this point, then there are things we're going to have to look at, for sure. But right now, I wouldn't want to be eliminating a classroom just to gain some extra, you know, make everybody else bigger. That would be my first go at it.
But I also, like, my understanding is that on the lower level, there are a lot of the specialty classrooms, if you will. And that kind of dictates the floor plan of each floor. So once you set those classrooms, you know, that's it. That's what you dictate. You don't want to kind of shrink it as though like a pyramid going up. Okay, it wouldn't be efficient. So you might as well build that. So it kind of telescope up. So sometimes when you stack like that, it's certain things dictate sort of basic dimensions.
This, Peter's really onto something here. This block here is determined very much by the needs of the STEM spaces. Construction, graphics, film, culinary arts, the arts, child development. They have to really be there and be adjacent to one another. And the spaces above, they need to be there as well because they will be using the bottom level as a resource. So that does dictate that footprint. But we are very, very efficient floor by floor on this block. And the classrooms generally are where they need to be. For the large science rooms, we really need something like 1,200 square feet. Can we crank out another 50 square feet? Well, I think that's conceivable. I think that we need to look at it again. But we don't want to leave the project with rooms that are just a little bit too small to be flexible. And it's very important that we don't scrimp in those areas.
Well, that brings up another point. That's actually the first time that we've actually heard what the spaces are. We've talked a lot about the cafeteria.
Yeah.
I mean, the gym.
Yes.
We've talked a lot about the auditorium. But we've never really had a description, and looking at the book, they were too small to read, frankly, while I tried to see. But I find that really interesting to know exactly where the classrooms will be, because we've talked about so much except classroom space. So I'm happy that tonight we're actually talking about classroom space, because that's what it should be all about.
I agree. And, the work that we have been doing on trying to populate these rooms has been telling us a lot about what the expectations are of the school for those rooms, and we're trying to ensure that those spaces will do the job.
But I think when we're looking at the plans, I wouldn't try to skim on the classrooms. I think the classroom wings needs to be what they should be to work. But it looks to me though that there are some rooms sort of within sort of the amorphous, sort of undefined kind of space that can change somewhat. You know, even in some of the furniture layouts, it shows, like, for instance, this breakout space next to a gym, and then, you know, there seems to be a triangular space,
Here.
yeah, like here, this, you know, that potentially can change some, and some, you know, there's some possibility of reducing some.
I think that's right, and I think that is exactly where we're going to go. But we want to have a sense of what the rules are. We don't want one of the rules to be, if the classroom wants to be 800 square feet and you can only give it 765, then that's okay. We don't want that kind of rule. We want different rules.
I would much rather see sort of some of these open, common, undefined space be adjusted somewhat,
Yeah.
and keep the main classroom space the size that they need to be.
Okay. Well, I think I believe that's very possible.
Keeping it as close to 135,000 square feet is
Correct.
We want to,
Right.
We're not that far off, we're about 8,000 square feet off, so I think by making some adjustments,
That's a
I
lot.
think
Well, square feet. 8,000 square feet isn't a lot.
Not in building this.
Not in building design, particularly some of the things they've already talked about adjusting, you're gonna find that by the time they make some adjustment, you're gonna
They
get down
added
by.
it pretty easy, right? It didn't look like it changed.
What was that? What was that?
You added it pretty easy.
Yeah, right, yeah, that is pretty good. I mean, if we told the people we were building a school for 140 feet, now
He's just
square
saying-
feet,
No,
no.
No, he's just saying
There
that
are
8,000
creeks
the whole thing.
Don't worry about it. Well, I am worried about the creek, because, you know,
I
just seems like every,
It's got a creek the other way.
just based on what we talked about, Rich has already reduced it by about 3,000 or 4,000, just
We
right now.
It crept up, and we've already
Creeping back
identified creeping back. The issue is, we don't want in that process to sacrifice some very important aspects to the school.
In many respects, we're at the same place we were when we were talking about roof designs. We need to be able to give them the parameters one way or the other, and I'm hearing that we are comfortable with the idea that the classroom spaces, the learning spaces, need to be what drives the square foot piece. And we need to be able to, or the architects need to be able to use the common spaces, the common spaces to absorb some of that design, so that we can, but we need to be able to tell them that.
We can't, one other thing we can't do is we can't not have common spaces. We cannot have people leave a room and not be able to move. There's some constraints on that, and we don't want to have a situation where the corridors are so narrow that people can't move easily through them. So there are a number of lines that we just don't want to cross. But we are going to shrink some of this, and we also what?
We have to.
We have to. Yes, and we understand that. We just need to tell you where we are now. But Joe and Brooks will be working on a very important schedule, and that is to come to you on a regular basis and go through the parts of the building at large scale. To do that in a night would be like going to an art museum and trying to get the whole thing. You can't encompass it all, but we will do that. So glad that you're interested.
So if I understand,
I'm interested in all.
Yes.
understand that, so as you're doing that, we'll end up, for example, with a chart this size of a science lab. We'll be able to actually look at it.
Yes, exactly, yeah, larger
Slow
scale.
enough so we can actually talk about
So
that.
we can see how we're
Yeah, and
populating,
see what the room
how we're
actually
working.
is.
I don't think we'll do every single.
No, but
class.
the style of classrooms we're talking about, right?
Yeah, I think that's great. That's what we should be doing.
So, well, that's really where we are. That is, yes, okay.
Going back to the gym and the mezzanine, the other cutaway picture that you had, wasn't really clear to me. Now that this one is up here, no, leave this one up here
Yes.
because, so where would the mezzanine come into from the gym? Would it come in off the, it would come right off?
Here's the lobby, here's the front door.
Yep,
The mezzanine or path to the bleachers would start here, we'd have doors here, and then run along the back and stop here. We would need to have another door out here, we'd have an exit here, because we need to be able to have two ways out, wherever you are. And then people would step down the bleachers to find their seat, and then either come back up, or perhaps go out to the lower level. I think it is worth pointing out that most of the parking at the school is going to be over here, which is on the lower level. So most of the people coming to the gym will come through at that point, rather than that point, simply because that's where the parking is. If people are dropped off, they'll be dropped off here. If people come by car, more than likely they'll choose to park over here and come in at the lower level. So when we meet again, we should have some sections of the building to look at a large scale.
Great.
When does it become too late to change what the sizes of the rooms are gonna be?
Well,
Rapidly approaching.
When Dennis says that's it.
Yesterday.
Rapidly approaching, but I mean, that's part of the process. I mean, I think that it's important that you guys see what we're talking about, and we owe you some more definition of each one of these spaces, and then that will help you understand it, but, I mean, we don't anticipate, and we wouldn't put you in a position where you don't have a choice, because that's not fair. You need to see what we're doing. I say it's rapidly approaching, because that's just how my mind's always working, so there is something.
Well, but I think what we need to do is, as we started doing today, is to let the team know is that, which is more important to us, to stay, to keep the sizes that is appropriate for the use, and what kind of spaces that we could afford to change or reduce to kind of bring us back into that 135,000 plus or minus square feet. And my sense is that the classrooms and the labs and so forth are important to be what they need to be. And that the so-called common or undefined spaces are where we like to kind of see shrink that back down.
I think we want to have classrooms that are the right size.
Right.
That's the most
So-
important
so-
thing
It would
about
be a
it. So,
shame to build a school
Which
that
kind
has
of allows
sufficient-
Brooks to continue developing at least that wing and still look at some of the other pieces.
right,
Kind of
find some
that
space
together.
somewhere.
Right.
And that, and that is what's important about this discussion tonight. We wanted to make you aware, because these parameters that you're giving us allows it, otherwise
And they can
we
keep
just go
going
forever, and we'll never move yet. So it is important. I think it's very productive where we're at with this, so.
what was it?
So that was productive then.
It was.
If we say so.
Well, I guess we're.
Anything else for us, Richard? Or is that it for now?
No, we have nothing